Hello students, welcome you all to my English class on Madhu App. We have discussed the chapter of your textbook, The Priceless Gift, 3 parts. Today we will discuss the next part. Before discussing the part, we have to recapitulate our last class. Okay students? Maggie and the writer got into the kitchen. Maggie introduced Mr. Gupta to her mother. Her mother was making cakes to be sold on Saturday night, which is a time of festivity in that poor neighborhood. Mrs. Vetty asked him about India. She also asked about Punjab, where her son was working as a soldier. Mr. Gupta was taken upstairs and they had tea together. Mrs. Betty showed him a photograph of her son Frankie, which was kept neatly in an envelope. Let's discuss next paragraphs. Maggie said Mrs. Betty, "So, Mr. Gupta, the ring which your brother sent you." She brought it and asked, "Can you see the past and future in it?" I took it and examined it. When Frankie said the ring, Mrs. Vetty said, "He wrote that if you concentrate on a distant person as you gaze into it, you will be able to see him and what he is doing." We have not had any news from Frankie for a long time, but we have not been able to see anything. Why don't you try? You are an Indian. You may be able to do it. Then next, I did not have the heart to tell the mother and daughter that the ring was nothing much, not a miraculous thing from a distant land. How could I shatter the dream? Several months passed. I visited Maggie and Mrs. Betty, but no news had come from Frankie. Mrs. Betty was sick, in a serious condition, aggravated by her anxiety for Frankie. I was in a fix. What could I say to console the mother? Only God knew whether Frankie was still alive or dead. "Mr. Gupta," the girl said, "my mother has not been ill like this before. I have read in books that Indians love the truth. If you could bring yourself to tell mother only once after looking into the crystal that Frankie is all right, that he is alive, will it be too much of a lie? Will it be very wrong?" I thought it over. I am not a very virtuous man, so I decided to do this, the least of my offenses. Maggie brought me the ring. I took it and approached her mother's bedside. Wishing her a good morning, I said, "Mrs. Betty, your son is alive. He is well." Okay student, let's discuss some new words. Meanings of new words. Examine, E-X-A-M-I-N-E. Examine means taste or observe. Concentrate, C-O-N-C-E-N-T-R-A-T-E means focus. Gaze, G-A-Z-E. Look at something or someone for a long time. Miraculous, M-I-R-A-C-U-L-O-U-S. Miraculous means amazing, unbelievable. Shatter, S-H-A-T-T-E-R. Shatter means break or smash. Aggravate, A-G-G-R-A-V-A-T-E means worsen, W-O-R-S-E-N. Next, anxiety, A-N-X-I-E-T-Y. Anxiety means eagerness, eagerness, eagerness. In a fix means in a difficult situation. Console, console, console means comfort or soothe. Crystal, crystal, crystal means a mineral or a rock. Virtuous, virtuous, virtuous means morally good. Then offense, offence, means crime. Okay students, let's discuss the text thoroughly. Maggie said Mrs. Betty, "So Mr. Gupta, the ring which your brother sent you," means Mrs. Betty told Maggie to show Mr. Gupta the ring which her brother sent her. She brought it and asked, "Can you see the past and future in it?" Means Maggie brought the ring and asked the writer if he could see the past and future in the ring. I took it and examined it. Means the writer took the ring and examined it. He looked into the ring again and again. When Frankie sent the ring, Mrs. Betty said, "He wrote that if you concentrate on a distant person as you gaze into it, you will be able to see him and what he is doing." Means when Frankie sent the ring, that means Mrs. Betty told the writer when Frankie sent the ring, he wrote that. Means Frankie wrote that if someone concentrate on a distant person, means someone thinking about a person who lived in a distant person. As you gaze into it means when the person looked into the ring, he would able to see him. Means he would able to the person whom he was remembering and what he is doing and what the person was doing. We have not had any news from Frankie for a long time. Means Maggie and her mother had not have any news from Frankie for a long time. But we have not been able to see anything. That means Maggie and her mother had not also been able to see anything in that ring. So Maggie's mother requested the writer to gaze into the ring and told about her son Frankie. Next, I did not have the heart to tell the mother and daughter that the ring was nothing much, not a miraculous thing for a distant land. How could I shatter their dream? Means the writer did not want to harass the mother and the daughter. Means the writer had not have the heart that to tell the lie that the ring was not a miraculous thing, not a magic thing. The writer did not want to shatter their dream. Means shatter means destroy their dream. Several months passed. I visited Maggie and Mrs. Betty, but no news had come from Frankie. Means several months passed. The writer again visited Maggie and Mrs. Betty. That means the writer went to their home again. But no news had come from Frankie. There, the writer came to know that any news had not come from Frankie. Mrs. Betty was sick in a serious condition, aggravated by her anxiety for Frankie. As Mrs. Betty was thinking about her son Frankie, means he became worsened by her anxiety for Frankie. Means By her eagerness for Frankie, Mrs. Betty became sick. I was in a fix. Means the writer was in a trouble, in a confusion. He thought that what would he do? What could I say to console the mother? Means the writer thought that what could he say to soothe the mother? So he thought that whether Frankie alive or not. Only God knew whether Frankie was still alive or dead. Then next, Mr. Gupta, the girl said, my mother has not been ill like this before. Means the girl told Mr. Gupta that her mother had not been ill like that before. I have read in books that Indians love the truth. Means Maggie had read in books that Indians love truth. If you could bring yourself to tell mother only once after looking into the crystal that Frankie is alright, that he is alive, will it be too much of a lie? Will it be very wrong? Means here Maggie requested the writer to gaze into the crystal, means the ring, and she requested the writer to tell the lie that Frankie is alright and alive. Then I thought it over. I am not a virtuous man, so I decided to do this, the list of my offences. Here the writer thought over the matter, and he also thought that he was not so much good person in moral. So he decided to do this, the list of his offences, means crime. Maggie brought me the ring. I took it and approached her mother's bedside. Wishing her a good morning, I said, Mrs. Betty, your son is alive. He is well. Means Maggie brought the writer the ring. Means Maggie gave the ring to the writer. Writer took it and approached her mother's bedside. Means writer went near to her mother. Wishing her a good morning, I said, means the writer said to Mrs. Betty that her son is alive. He is well. Means Frankie is alive and Frankie is well. Okay students, let's discuss some outlines of today's discussion. Okay, Mrs. Betty showed him the miraculous ring which her son had presented to Maggie. Who showed? Mrs. Betty showed Mr. Gupta the miraculous ring which her son had presented to Maggie. She told that if one concentrated on a distant portion while gazing into it, one would able to see him and what he was doing. Then, but she was sad. Why? That they couldn't see Frankie through the ring. She requested Mr. Gupta to try and gaze into the ring and show them what Frankie was doing. But Mr. Gupta couldn't able to keep her request. Why? As the ring was not a miraculous thing. Then, several months later, Mr. Gupta paid a visit to Maggie and her mother, Mrs. Betty. By then, they had no news from Frankie. They were very worried and Mrs. Betty was very serious. Who was very serious? Mrs. Betty was very serious. Maggie requested him to look into the ring and tell her mother about the well-being of Frankie in India. What did Maggie request Mr. Gupta? Yes, students. Maggie requested Mr. Gupta to look into the ring and tell her mother about the well-being of Frankie in India. To please them, he went up to her mother's bedside and told her that her son was alive and well. Okay, student, let's discuss some questions and their answers. Okay, students, first question. What did Maggie show to the writer? Yes, the answer is Maggie showed the ring to the writer. Showed the ring to the writer, which her brother sent. Okay, next question. Why did Mrs. Betty sick? Yes, students, very good. Mrs. Betty was sick. Mrs. Betty was sick. Aggravated. Aggravated by her anxiety for Frankie. Okay, then third question. What did Maggie request the writer to do looking at the ring? Yes, students, very good. Maggie requested the writer to tell about her brother's well-being to her mother. Okay, students. Then next question. Who was in a fix? Yes, students. The answer is the writer. The writer was in a fix. The writer was in a fix. Okay. Then last question, not the least. What did the author decide to do? Yes, the answer is the author decided to tell the lie to Mrs. Betty. Okay, students, bye bye.